groovy.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Jim here with another bunch of import game recommendations, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Sega Saturn, which before we get started I will say is a prime console to collect imports for, because essentially all you need is an action replay cart and then you've got a region-free console on your hands, and there are a ton of really good Japan exclusive Saturn games, and they're typically a lot cheaper to collect than Saturn games in the US or Europe. So this is definitely a system I would recommend if you want to get into import collecting. And with that being said, we're going to start with a really excellent game by Capcom. This is Tenchi Kurau 2.
And this is a game in a series of games that's probably best known as a series of strategy RPGs. So for example, if you've ever played Legacy of an Emperor on the NES, that's a game in this series. This is obviously not a strategy RPG though. This is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, and it essentially feels like a 2D version of a Dynasty Warriors game. You have a whole bunch of different characters to choose from, and you can play two-player co-op. The screen is always full of enemies at any one given time for you to beat the hell out of. There are extra weapons scattered around each stage, and treasure chests filled with money and items for you to bust open. You can even mount a horse occasionally and dash back and forth across the screen, just taking out everyone in your path, which is really cool. Other than that though, this does play more or less like any other early 90s Capcom beat 'em up. So you have your attack button and your jump button, and that's basically it. You can perform a couple of special moves with each character, and of course a super move that drains a little bit of your energy, and each stage ends with a boss battle against some oversized, muscle-bound, hulking characters. So it's not terribly innovative, but it does play really well, and it is a lot of fun. The graphics are good, the sound design is pretty good too. The problem is this is getting to be a bit more expensive of a game. I'd say if you went looking online, you'd be expected to pay anywhere from $80 to $100, which is pretty steep. But if you're a fan of Capcom's arcade beat-em-ups and you collect import Saturn games, then this is one that I would definitely recommend keeping an eye out for.
Tenchi Kurau 2, highly recommended for you beat-em-up fans out there, of which I am one. It's a great game. Next up, speaking of beat-em-ups, this is an excellent one. It is Nichette Suo Yakko.
And this is a game by Technosoft, who most people probably know for the Thunder Force series, which is an excellent series of shooters, but they actually have a pretty robust catalog of games, and this is obviously one of the beat-em-ups that they produced, and it is a damn good one. You're playing as a family of characters trying to rescue their genius scientist of a mother/wife from a criminal organization that wants her to create a super serum for them. So you have 3 playable characters to choose from, and they fall into the archetypes of speedy, balanced, and powerful. They each have a bunch of special attacks they can perform, and screen-clearing super attacks. There are a ton of weapons to pick up, including machine guns and rocket launchers, which I like very much. Always a blast to have some firepower thrown into your beat-em-up. Plus, this game has some awesome 2D graphics and a great soundtrack, and the whole thing has sort of a wacky vibe to it. You'll encounter a lot of weird and comical enemies and bosses. Just for an example, there's an entire stage set inside the belly of a whale, and you fight octopi wearing boxing gloves. So it does get pretty nonsensical at times, but it plays well. It's a lot of fun and an all-around well-made game. It's another expensive one though, definitely over $100. But again, if you love mid-90s arcade beat-em-ups and you collect for the Saturn, then this is one I'd recommend tracking down.
Nichette Suo Yakko, really excellent arcade-style beat-em-up, highly recommended to import collectors. And moving from great beat-em-ups to great shoot-em-ups, this one's awesome. It is Game Tengoku, the Game Paradise.
This is a game by Jaleco, and one of the reasons I really love this game, aside from the fact that it's just an all-around really good, really fun shooter, is the setting. You're essentially a bunch of characters from various video games that have to fight off an evil video game mastermind guy who has taken over the inside of an arcade and turned it against the owner. So here you go flying around in the arcade and inside all of the various games, destroying enemies and, trying to keep this guy from taking over the arcade. So there are a lot of stages that replicate various types of games. So one stage is set up like a racing game, another one is an RPG, for example, where you're flying around blasting little enemies on what looks like kind of like an old school Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest map. There are stages that really resemble Space Invaders and things to that effect. So I really love the premise of this game, and like I said, it is an excellent shooter. It's very fun, it is very challenging. You can play 2 players, and that's a lot of fun as well. The graphics are excellent, really awesome 2D sprites, really great character and enemy designs. The soundtrack is absolutely awesome. There are a ton of cutscenes with lots and lots of voice acting. So presentation wise, this game really stands out. It's very colorful, very cute, a cute 'em up, if you will, and that's maybe the most standout aspect of it. But aside from that, it also plays really well. It is another game that's getting a little more expensive these days, but I think you could still find it for maybe 50 to 60 bucks, which isn't cheap. But if you really love 2D shoot 'em ups as much as I do, and you like cute 'em ups that have kind of wacky premises, then this is one that you're really going to enjoy. Game Tengoku. I have a lot of fun with this game.
Game Tengoku, the game paradise, excellent shoot 'em up, highly recommended to shooter fans. It's really good, and another outstanding shooter for the Saturn, especially good on the Saturn, I might add. This is Strikers 1945.
And this is a shooter by Psikyo, who made some really amazing shooters on the Saturn and Dreamcast, stuff like Gunbird and Sengoku Blade, Cannon Spike, stuff like that. So they have a very large library of great shooters. This might possibly be my favorite that they've ever produced. It's essentially a whole bunch of World War II era fighter planes versus giant robots and spaceships, and even being strapped to a rocket and flying into space. So your P-51 Mustang can be flying around on the moon, blowing away robots and spaceships. That's very cool. So there are a whole bunch of different planes to choose from in this game. Each one is unique from the others. So they each have a different primary shot. They each have different helper options that can be charged up for power shots that are unique to each ship. The super bombs are unique to each ship, so there's a lot of variety. It's a very challenging game, as is typical of Psikyo shooters. There are a whole bunch of difficulty options, so you can start at 1 and work your way all the way up to 8, which at that point it becomes absolutely insane. It's like a much more fast-paced bullet hell game, but these are very fun, really well-made shooters, very good port for the Saturn. It's pretty much arcade perfect. The graphics are really good. The sound design is outstanding as well. This is one that it's not terribly pricey yet. I would say 40 to 50 bucks is what you can expect to pay online, which again isn't cheap, but for what I think is one of the best shooters Psikyo has ever produced, one of my favorite shooters in general, I'd say 40 or 50 bucks is reasonable. So again, I say if you're a shooter fan and you collect imports for the Saturn, you can't really do much better than this one. I absolutely love it.
Strikers 1945, one of my favorite shooters, highly recommended to you shoot 'em up fans out there. It's really great. And last but not least, an excellent fighting game. This one's by Capcom. It is Cyberbots.
And essentially all you need to know about this game is that it's a mid-90s Capcom fighter with giant robots, and that's already awesome. That's a premise that sells itself. Essentially, you pick your pilot, and then you choose from a whole bunch of different mech suits, and they each have different arms or legs or treads or different weapons. Essentially, the mechs are the actual playable characters, and the human beings are just there to provide personality for the mechs. So it's not just a robot. You have somebody inside the robot that can interact with other characters during cutscenes and things like that. But it's a very fun 2D fighter. It's definitely a simplified fighter when compared to something like Street Fighter, for example. You only have a couple of attack buttons and a boost button, so it's very easy to get the hang of, very pick up and play kind of game. Again, plays very well. It's a lot of fun. I really do enjoy this one. Plus, the graphics are outstanding, and the soundtrack I really like a lot. If you like soundtracks for Capcom's other mid-90s fighters like Street Fighter Alpha 2 and Darkstalkers, stuff like that, you'll really like the soundtrack in this game. So just all around, very well made, very good gameplay, very good graphics, very good sound design. Not a lot I can complain about with this game. And right now, the price is still pretty good. You can get just the standalone copy of the game for about $30 on eBay. There is also a big special edition that comes with an art book and fold-out stuff, and that's actually not terribly expensive right now either, maybe $50 at max. So no matter which way you go, you're not going to be spending a whole lot. This is also available on the PlayStation, but for my money, 2D fighters always play better on the Sega Saturn. So again, if you're a big fan of Capcom's mid-90s fighters and you collect games for the Saturn, then you're going to want to go for this one. It is excellent.
Cyberbots, excellent game, sort of a hidden gem, if you will, in the Capcom library. Highly recommend picking up and playing this one. It is excellent. And there you go, 5 Japan exclusive Saturn games that I highly recommend to import game collectors. They are excellent. Hey, down in the comments, what are your favorite import Saturn games, and what are some that you'd really like to get your hands on that you've never played before? I'd like to know. And until next time, thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Goodbye.